Everyone knows our world is hopeless, but what do you actually do with that hopelessness is a very different question. Because obviously we're dealing with the impenetrability between knowing things are bad and not being able to take action, or wanting to but not having that outlet. The system is too complex. And so you get small victories. You get people elected who are actually not advocating for corporate interests, etc., but for the embetterment of people. Or you see the collectivity of people fighting ICE in Minnesota. But you still have the big, broader problems and the huge mess we are in. So how do you actually think your way into tackling this problem? The two modes of fantasy that help us get there are post-apocalypses and utopias. I talked about post-apocalypses already, but operating in a world in which there's no cover, no outside guarantee, and taking risks, taking that burden on ourselves is what the post-apocalypse helps prepare us to do. You face the violence of a completely undoing situation. You face the ways in which you yourself are undone. That's what my work, Where We've Made It Dark, is useful for in our current era. But the utopia side of things is a way of breaking into what life could be like without the current problems you're facing. Who we are on the other side of things. So, it's not this way in which you can relax and enjoy things in some blissful state. It's a way of decathecting to your own antagonisms, your own ways in which your lot in life keeps you engaged to it. A really easy example is the poor person who fantasizes about being a billionaire. The system is a system that props up billionaires. The poor person will never become a billionaire, but they get that fantasy of you can be a billionaire, you have that possibility. So, that's a very clear example of that person needing a different vision of what life could be outside of this structure of we can all be billionaires. I think the best utopia is Star Trek: The Next Generation because it meaningfully wipes away a lot of the antagonisms that drive capitalism and keep the excesses of capitalism spinning. So racism and sexism, the enemy other figure there, putting money first above humanity, war, and you get this meaningful experience of how we connect to life outside of that, only to go off into space, find alien races, new adventures, new antagonisms. So the utopia can encourage us in our fight for something else. It keeps you from just accepting the way things are and taking, little wins, little pragmatic moves, but actually fighting for tangible change. If you want to engage this material, American Utopia by Fredric Jameson's necessary, but unfortunately, I don't think it's a very successful work. But understanding why it's not successful is what the interesting thing is. There's an essay too by Slavoj Žižek critiquing the work that I think's better. If you know me, that should be an obvious thing. But what constitutes Jameson's attempt here is thinking about this mass mobilization through the form of the army. We all become part of an army. We don't work too much, and we're not fighting wars, but we're just mobilized to see to the needs of society in this collective state. Mobilization's tricky. I mean, with Star Trek's Utopia, we are mobilized with the Enterprise, but the Federation's not all that society is, so you still have that distinction. With Pluribus, the utopic element of Pluribus is mass mobilization means we can actually confront the crises of our era and end war, etc. But there's something deeply undoing to the endless, like literally endless mobilization of being part of that unity. Now, this Achilles heel here is the state. The state is the one thing that gets us out of mass mobilization. It's mobilized to take care of things for us. The trains come running in on time. So we can relax. We can live some private life and then, go back into the public life. And Jameson is envisioning a utopia as anti-state and as apolitical or post-politics. And those are two deeply anti-Hegelian points that confuse me because I don't know the extent to which he considered himself a Hegelian. He quotes Hegel regularly enough, but with Hegel, we have the state as the thing in which we find our fulfillment. It's necessary for us as subjects to have the state to find ourselves in, to put ourselves out in the world with. Politics is the struggle to define who we are collectively. And that's necessary insofar as we come into problems, antagonisms. So even if you overcome the current antagonisms you have, there's just going to be more antagonisms on the other side of that. There's still going to be a need to redefine who we are for new problems. So you have a foundation, a groundwork that is utopic, but that's grounded in a state. That's so like with Star Trek, it's grounded in the Federation and the Prime Directive. Like with the Prime Directive, with that firm footing, we can go out and struggle with things, but we still have to, struggle collectively, and we'll disagree and whatnot. So, you still have politics there. You still have this need of a fantasy to help you frame how you engage the problems collectively. And post-politics is the very problem of our era, this inability to advocate for things politically and have our voices matter at all. That's why terrible things are happening every day, every week. It's because our voices don't matter. And that's why with all sorts of terrible things happening, there's an excuse given that isn't believable. That's not persuasive. This is the eradication of politics and the assertion of might makes right. If I'm sitting in the presidential seat, I can do whatever I want. The end. No politics. No ways in which we can use our words to advocate for something together to change things. Jameson also tries to correct Marxist utopia with the idea that when we get over capitalism, we'll all have infinite production, because with psychoanalysis, we understand very clearly how envy is constitutive of humanity as such. So, even if everything is equal and blissful, I'm still going to envy what my neighbor has, even if it's the same as what I have, and I'll enjoy wishing for his demise. And, Jameson imagines a Lacanian psychoanalytic institute that will help teach people to have better, healthier relationships towards their own envy, which I think is weird. It sounds like it's out of Brave New World, basically. And I'm a Lacanian. I think people should know psychoanalysis, but that's not the same thing as going through the psychoanalytic process itself. It's not a self-help thing. So the other real issue with this post-political utopia is, where is universality life? A utopia is not one in which we've achieved universality, which is not just justice, but the ways in which we advocate for the person from their own position, their own out-group position. So the person who's suffering an injustice is not part of the in-group. We get to their very space and realize the ways in which we're connected structurally, even if we are living a comfortable life and they're suffering immensely. We aren't just like Marie Antoinetting, fantasizing about the ways in which they enjoy their suffering. We are open to the undoing aspects of their own position and advocate for the change from that very point. So utopia isn't like this cohesive whole. That's like the real error of utopias. Like we're talking about these islands that are outside of the terrors of the world, but in an island, in a small group, which Alexandra Kleeman is how she envisions her utopia. But these small islands are just the fantasy of capitalism, of tribal wholeness, of finding ourselves through ethnicity, basically, or through tradition. Those are all just ways of coping with capitalism. Universality is finding the person who's not in that in-group, who is suffering through whatever the suffering is and whatever the injustice is, and working to that point to fight from there. So Star Trek's utopia is a matter of striving for universality in the cosmos. But it's a very careful one that isn't just full of itself, doing whatever it feels like with saving the world. It has the Prime Directive holding itself back and making itself very careful with its decisions, even if that means there's suffering in the world that they allow. So if you want to build your own utopia, you have to focus on universality. And I have a small book curriculum to recommend here. The main one, and the real thinker here of universality is Todd McGowan. I'm immensely fond of his call to universality in the world. And the main work that's very simple is actually embracing alienation. This breaks down the in-group, out-group mentality that's endemic to our era. If you want to get further with McGowan's work, more on universality in his work on Hegel, which gives more the foundation, the philosophical foundation for universality. And if you want to get philosophy self-help book. Like, this is the closest this gets with capitalism and desire, where you are decathecting to the ways in which you desire within capitalism. It's not this like run off into the boonies sort of response. It's just a plain non-phantasmatic relation towards the ways in which we desire. So this really helps understand both, desire on a practical level and a psychoanalytic one. And it's an easy read. It's the one book I think people should read, period. So that is the stuff that would enable someone to write a proper utopia, basically. But the main thing is to not just accept things the way they're handed to you. That's what a utopia gives us.